Hello everyone, and welcome to ARKS Armoire, a brand new series about the backgrounds of some of the more interesting weapons within the PSO2 universe. We'll be examining the lore of these items not just in PSO2, but also within the Phantasy Star franchise, as well as the real-world stories upon which they're based. You know who I am, but if you don't, my name's Zio, and I'll be your lore keeper. We'll start off with a bit of a double feature of sorts. Today, we'll be discussing the Ame-no-Habakiri, and by extension the Ame-no-Murakumo, both wielded by Hitsugi Yasaka. Just as a heads up, there will be some spoilers for events in episode 4 coming up later on. I'll let you know once we get to that point. The origins of these blades can be traced all the way back to the Japanese creation myth, the Tenchi Kaibyaku, or the creation of heaven and earth. In the beginning, the universe was shapeless and chaotic. Eventually, the lighter particles would rise up to form the heavens. The heavier matter made up the earth. The two deities Izanagi and Izanami are said to be the ones responsible for the creation of Japan. Izanagi would take their bejeweled spear and dip it into the waters below. When he pulled the spear back up, the water that dripped off of it would form the island of Onogoro, where the two would make their home. These two would create the next generation of deities, representing all the natural features of Japan. Izanami would give birth to Kagutsuchi, the fire god, but she was badly burned in the process and didn't survive. A furious Izanagi would subsequently behead the baby boy. Izanami was gone, and a grief-stricken Izanagi would follow her into the underworld, Yomi, to bring her back. One thing about the underworld is that it's absolute darkness in there. Izanami would tell him that she wasn't ready to go back yet. Her bond with Yomi was too strong though. She had to make a deal with the gods of the underworld to facilitate her release. Izanami has him promise her that he wouldn't look at her until the time was right. Izanagi didn't listen, of course. He breaks off part of his comb and lights it up like a torch. A furious Izanami would send hordes of demons after Izanagi, forcing him to retreat. Once he made it outside, Izanagi sealed up the entrance with a giant boulder. Izanagi felt unclean because of his contact with the dead, so he took a bath to purify himself. The sun goddess Amaterasu appeared from his left eye, the moon god Tsukuyomi came from his right eye, and Susanoo, the god of the seas, came out of his nose. Susanoo is going to be the main focus here. The god of storms, and the strongest swordsman of all the gods, was known for being something of a trickster though. The heavens were a place of tranquility, and a little bit too boring for his tastes. At some point he had a feud with his sister Amaterasu and he was banished to the earth. Susanoo finds himself in Izumo where he meets a grieving elderly couple along with their daughter. They have a bit of a snake problem here. We're not talking about your average garden snake here though. This one has 8 heads and a penchant for snacking on young maidens. The fearsome 8-headed serpent, Yamato no Orochi. The fiend had already consumed 7 of their daughters and was coming for the 8th. Susanoo meets this 8th daughter, Kushinada, and falls in love with her. Susanoo sizes up the creature and quickly realizes that brute force just isn't going to win the day here. He needed to fall back and devise a plan to cripple the fiend somehow. Susanoo agrees to help in exchange for Kushinada's hand in marriage. So what's the plan? Oh, it's real simple. Just get him drunk. Your normal sized bottle of booze wasn't going to cut it here with a giant 8-headed serpent. So 8 huge vats of sake were set up. Susanoo tells Orochi that they're an aperitif of sorts. Orochi takes the bait and starts drinking. So once the serpent was sufficiently soused and sleepy, it was time for Susanoo to get to work. He then proceeds to lop off each of the 8 heads with his sword, dubbed Ame-no-Habakiri, or Heavenly Snake Slayer if you prefer. The storm god notices something interesting in one of the tails. He finds a sword that he would call Ame-no-Murakumo, or Gathering Clouds of the Heavens. Susanoo takes this sword back to the heavens as a peace offering for his sister Amaterasu. Generations later, the sword ends up in the hands of the high priestess of the Ise shrine, Yamato Hime. She lends the sword to her nephew, Yamato Takeru, who was sent eastward at the behest of his father, Emperor Keiko. One day, Prince Yamato was lured into an open grassy field during a hunting expedition. Fiery arrows rained down and set the nearby grass ablaze. The panicked prince desperately cut away at the surrounding grass in the hopes of hindering the oncoming flames. But something was different here. The prince noticed the wind blew whichever direction he swung his sword. Auntie Hime had given him another gift before he departed, a bag of flint stones. Being the resourceful type, Prince Yamato struck the stones together, igniting the surrounding foliage. He then swung his sword, fanning the flames and pushing them back towards his would-be assassins. Here's where the sword gets the name Kusanagi, or grass cutter. Along with the jewel and the mirror, the sword is one of the 3 imperial regalia. These holy relics are presented to a new emperor whenever they take the throne. Traditionally, they symbolize the divinity of the imperial bloodline. So now we arrive at the spoiler check. As always, if you want to experience the story organically, turn back now. Mother was interested in Al, so she sends Haggith after him. Al and Hitsugi encounter Haggith, who summons a group of phantasms with his emerald tablet. Hitsugi, not wanting things to end this way, manifests an avatar arm of her own, the Ame-no-Habakiri. At some point though, the sword breaks when Hitsugi squares off against a brainwashed Kori. Later on though, she manifests a new avatar arm, the Ame-no-Murakumo, complete with a change of clothes. The avatar weapons are a manifestation of the user's imaginations and desires. In Hitsugi's case, she wanted to protect those she cared about and was a huge fan of Japanese mythology. Believe it or not, these 2 swords were not katanas, despite their countless depictions as such over the years. The predecessors to the katanas that we know didn't start showing up until around the 12th century. If you enjoyed what you just watched, you know the routine. And of course, share with your friends. After all, sharing is caring, right? As always, thanks for watching. And remember, to thine own self be true. Until next time, farewell.